Okay, so this is the section where we're going to take the sphere and we want to do the naming to get a better convention going on here, to get our scene cleaned up and for anybody to work on this and know what's going on basically in our scene. So always make sure that you name your stuff. Don't forget about that. And we're going to work with the scene that we have previously from the shadows render layer. And you see that we still have that existing down there by the master layer, which is pretty good. We want to work with that. We have the ability to turn off our render layers so that they do not render. What I did is click on the shadow render layer attribute for rendering purposes. That is the little button that will allow it to render or not. When it's not clicked the way that I just clicked it, it's not going to render out these objects. All of these objects are a part of that scene, but I'm making a new render layer with just the sphere and the floor that I had selected. The icon that I clicked added them to a new layer and created a new layer, and that's going to be for the Mila passes. So this is going to have a different lighting system. I'm going to use the physical sun and sky, and you guys could also use any HDRI images that you created in order to get the light sources from them and the reflection maps and all that good stuff that came along with the light probe that you shot in order to have a better lighting system and reflective system of things that were actually in the room or the location of where you were shooting. So we have the Mila passes here, and I added a Mila material on here to the sphere. So it has its own Mila material. And we're going to go over a few of the options here, but again, you might want to change the name of this. I'm going to put something that makes sense for what we're doing on this lesson. So it's the ball material underscore Mila, so specifically a Mila material. And you guys can name things however they make sense to you. That makes sense to me for this tutorial. I'm going to change it to a reflective type of material, which is going to be pretty good for our reflection maps and such that are going to come through the passes. These are just some of the attributes that are a part of it. Again, I'm just kind of clicking on these to show you what we have. We do have indirect and direct contribution maps and such that will go across here. And you guys are going to see that this is a very easy material to work with. So I'll add another one to the floor here. And this is going to be easy for render passes. So the floor, I can do a little bit of the same thing, but I can tell it to be just a simple diffuse or a certain type of base component as a default. I'm calling it the ground material, and again, letting it know that it's a Mila material. I'm leaving it to diffuse because I don't really need it to be reflective, at least in this case. You could do a test with reflections if you like. I'm going to put a checker texture, a checker texture on there in order to, kind of see what's going on there. And again, I just didn't really want to texture it. So that one's built into Maya. It's procedural, so I just threw it on there. I'm going to open up the render settings for that specific render layer, and I'm going to name it. You see the last one had the shadow map. I want to know that this is just specifically Mila, so I don't have a specific name to give it other than working with the Mila material. I leave all the other stuff the same, the name.number.extension, so that works. And now I'm going to be dealing with render passes. So in my scene tab, I go down to passes, and then I can click on any of these ones that I want to add. Now this is really pretty simple, but you guys see the ones with that slash right there, so direct glossy slash specular. We can separate those so that we have the specular a little bit, separate as its own kind of render pass. We could always add the ambient occlusion down here, which is super simple because it will just do it for you, opposed to setting up another render layer, but we do have the option of setting up another render layer if we like. I'll close that out, and I just want to kind of go here and double check this thing. Look in my scene, always do test renders, all that good stuff. I'm selecting the object. I may need to change some of the attributes for it. So I check things as I go. There's my material. It's reflective. I left the color. The glossy roughness is a thing to address because it will add a rough type of kind of speckled roughness onto this object, and it also adds to the render time when you have that up. So I'm going to put it to 0, and I notice that when I do the test render, my sphere still has the attributes turned off inside of my attribute editor. So the ball is set to not render out its visibility, its primary visibility. I also need to create a light in there, so I look into the scene, and inside of here I don't have a light node. So I create the physical sun and sky, and that may be the main thing that I was doing here, depending on where I grabbed the ball to put it into the specific render layer for the passes. So I'm going to position this light, and it's the sun direction for the physical sun and sky. I'll pull it out here just so you can see which direction it's coming. And I'll do a test render. Now we have something going on here. So I must have taken the ball and the ground from the master layer. And as it's rendering out, you see how it's really adding all these reflections and stuff that we were pulling based off the passes. So all that is happening each pass individually as it's rendered. And we can go load each pass by going to File down to Load Render Pass. I started with the first one, and I'm just going to size this up a little bit, but this is the direct diffuse. So you see it's just a diffuse pass, which is a color. It's a flat color. Well, not a flat color, but you don't see the reflections. My ambient occlusion, my direct diffuse, my layer, I go up the layer down to direct glossy specular. And you also see like the Alt 3, Alt 4, Alt 5. Those are all the hotkeys that I can use from going to layer down to these separate passes. And these are, or this is the way to load the passes to view them in order to see what I'm going to be working with when I composite them inside of Nuke or inside of After Effects or maybe another program. So I go to the render settings and I see that my Mila materials named that. And I'm going to add passes to it. No really specific reason, but I will know that it's passes. And since it's an open EXR, it's going to be one file. So I do want to know in this case that it's a Mila passes file. So it has passes in it. It's not just one master render of everything composited from Maya. So as this thing renders out, it shouldn't take too long to render. And normally it would render a little bit faster, but again, I'm running a lot of stuff on the computer today in order to jump back and forth easily for this tutorial. So anything else running in your background you may want to close, and then you'll check the percentages here. And you'll also see in the render view where it says render time, and it's still on the screen, that the test render took about 20 seconds to render out. So that gives you an idea of that times however many frames you need to render is going to be the time that it might take, at least a close proximity to what it might take to render out a specific scene like this one. If I check things in After Effects, which I may just go to Nuke, but I'll make a new project to clear this thing out and hopefully not crash out anything in the scene here. We can composite this thing inside of Adobe After Effects or inside of Nuke. It's really not a huge deal to do one over the other. So I'm going to open up Nuke here. And for us, we're using Nuke on this go around, so we might as well finish it off in Nuke and then maybe do another one in After Effects to show you how to do that.